Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider podcast, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, The Times-Picayune. I'm Perryn Keys. I'm the executive sports editor, joined today, as always, by Wilson Alexander, our lead LSU football beat reporter, and by Scott Rabalais, our venerable longtime columnist. These two gentlemen back from Tuscaloosa. They survived and lived to tell about it. We are here to talk all things LSU Alabama, painful or enjoyable as it may be. We will get into all of it. Today's episode is brought to you by Champion Wealth Strategies. As always, to learn more, please go to championwealthstrategies.com. We appreciate them being aboard. LSU takes it on the chin in the second half in Tuscaloosa. Missed tackles, very few third down stops. Offense falters just a little. Jayden Daniels obviously takes a hard hit, gets knocked out of the game. I'm sure we will discuss that. We will discuss penalties that weren't called, penalties that were called. We will get into all of that, but I think a lot to sort through here and now, starting probably with the one overarching topic. What does LSU play for now? These two gentlemen are here to discuss it all. Gentlemen, welcome in.
Good morning. That was an ugly game on the season that has had a few of them now. LSU's defense just keeps letting it down.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was distracted. Alabama just converted another third down. Just got a notification on my phone. So, but let's go on. That'll probably keep going on throughout the show. But we'll give you a new tally.
While Alabama is still converting third down, it's a bit of business here. We'll get into. If you're tuning in, you know that the Advocate's always been the number one destination for LSU football coverage. This podcast is just another way for us to bring our great coverage to you. We are here Monday and Thursday live on our YouTube channels. LSU Tigers on NOLA.com, first and foremost, but the Advocate social channels, NOLA.com social channels. You can catch up with us if you don't catch us live. You can catch up with us later on our YouTube channels. Please find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever other finer podcasts are found. And while you're at it, please subscribe to The Advocate if you haven't already, with our print edition or our digital edition. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. And sign up for our newsletter, our LSU newsletter that goes all the way through football season and LSU women's basketball season, men's basketball season, and baseball season, and all the way throughout. So if you're feeling down about football right now, there's still plenty of reason to sign up and stay informed. Rab handles that 3 times a week, but it's a daily newsletter. To sign up, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. Okay, guys. First and foremost, we'll get to we'll get to where does LSU go from here. But first and foremost, LSU loses 42-28. They're now 6-3 overall, 4-2 in SEC play. We've joked about it once or twice already. They can't get off the field on third down, and they really basically through the entirety of the game can't stop the run, which I think was a little bit surprising in the sense that I think going into this, we discussed this on this podcast several times, that we probably figured that if Alabama were to win in a high-scoring affair, they were probably going to go deep over LSU's very thin and very injured secondary. That just wasn't the case. Alabama with 288 yards rushing. It was a season high by a substantial amount. That was a season high. And so, I'll just put it to you guys, and Rab, if you want to go first. What's the number one issue facing the LSU defense now, right in the here and now, but also big picture?
Just a lack of execution. I know they're thin and inexperienced in some places, but I just don't buy that they're not capable, completely of doing better than this. I mean, this was Alabama's. Nick Saban said this is our most complete game. Well, yeah, not surprising. The most points they scored in an SEC game. They've given up over 30 points. 5 times this year, 50 points, 40 points a couple of times. They're ranked very badly in a number of stats. And you have to say it's a combination of things. As I like to say, it wasn't just hitting the iceberg that sank the Titanic. It was going too fast. It was ignoring the ice warnings. It was the way the ship was built. And I think that's what you have to say about this LSU defense. It's not just the players. It certainly doesn't seem to be the coaching helping them either. And I think Brian Kelly's going to have to take a long, hard look at a lot of things once this season is over. Maybe now. For example, USC just fired their defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch, a team that's in similar straits to LSU, great offense, bad defense. But probably not. Probably they get through the season, and then he's got some tough choices to make. But it's a combination of things. It's not just one thing that you point to.
Wilson?
No, it's certainly a combination of things. And it's like when you have players that are not up to the talent level that you're used to seeing on the LSU's defense, and the coaching that's not getting the most out of what they still have, it's just bad plus bad, and it's too much to deal with. I mean, like I said, there's a lack of talent and there's some inexperience on this defensive side, but that also still somewhat falls on the coaching. Like, it doesn't look like the players that they have been developed properly this season. The defensive line has been a major disappointment because that was supposed to be, if there was one, a strength of this team was the front seven. You haven't been getting the most out of that. I mean, Alabama had given up at least 4 sacks in every single game that it had played except the season opener against Middle Tennessee State. LSU had 2.
Yeah.
And they're both in the first half.
Yep.
And, they weren't, like I said, getting the most out of that. And so that's what's kind of concerning. That's part of the problem right now. And it's also the worry now long term, because as attention is going to inevitably start sort of turning, if it hasn't already, toward 2024, at least externally. They got a season to finish out here, but, this one is not going to end in a championship. If you have any hope of 2024 ending in one, whether it's SEC or getting to the expanded college football playoff, you've got to figure out a way for it's all going to, like I said, attention is all going to be focused on that and making sure that this defense can do what it needs to do in order to contend for those things. But it's going to be hard because you got to recruit your way out of this. And like you said, Brian Kelly needs to evaluate this defensive coaching staff because they just have not gotten the most out of these players. And there's been some very head-scratching schematic decisions in this game in particular. Why there was never a spy on Jalen Milroe doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or at least never even trying it at one point. And then also never able to get a pass rush, no blitzing much at all. It was a little bit bizarre.
I actually, you bring up a fine point. That was certainly social media was certainly a buzz about the notion that perhaps you deploy Harold Perkins as a spy on Jalen Milroe. Maybe you don't go in with that strategy as that part of your game, with that as part of your game plan, because you figure, I mean, again, for the 100th time we discussed, hey, if they're gonna beat these guys, they're gonna beat them over the top. Well, halftime adjustment, that was not seemingly part of the halftime adjustment. Let's just get to let's get down to brass tacks. Alabama's 11 of 14 on third downs. They stopped them the very first series. They got a sack and stopped those guys and got them to punt. That was the first and only time that Alabama punted in the entire game. The other times they stopped them on third down, it was 2 field goal misses, and if I'm not mistaken, the other times were, downs at the end of the first half and at the end of the game. So, Rab, what do you make of this?
It's a long-term thing at LSU, and it's not just.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but just to put a finer point on that, LSU went into the game 101st in the nation on third. This is not something new. LSU went into the game 101st in the nation in third down defense. They're now 125th in the nation in third down defense. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It hasn't been. I go back to this LSU. Going back to the Chinese Bandits in 1958, that third-string defense that they had that helped them win the national championship has built a lot of his reputation on defense. Tommy Casanova and Glenn Dorsey and the Honey Badger and Patrick Peterson and all these things. And it hasn't been good for a long time. But it's really bad now. I mean, I brought a notebook too, Perryn. And LSU has given up 30 or more points 10 times in the last 2 years, 40 or more points 5 times, 50 or more points twice. It's the most times LSU has given up 30 or more points in a two-year span, except for 2020, 2021. And, of course, 2020 was the COVID season that was just all messed up.
And a team that was decimated in terms of players that were lost to the NFL.
And only once, 07, 08, did they give up 50 or more points more. That was 3 times. So that was but they're bad in so many categories. 97th in the total defense, 102nd in rushing defense. You mentioned red zone defense. Nothing is good, and they weren't great last year. Their numbers are, they were 40th in total defense, 62nd in rushing defense, 30th in scoring defense. Not serviceable, but certainly not outstanding by any means. So as Wilson said, it's not an overnight fix. It's easier to do in some of these other sports where LSU's had a lot of success lately. It's not an overnight fix, and you got to do well in recruiting. You got to do well in the portal. You got to do well on the coaching staff. And like I said, Brian Kelly's got to take a long look at this because, and if I may invoke that a lot of LSU fans don't like me to say, Nick Saban doesn't need to bring in a Pete Jenkins to tell him to crowd the defensive line more, that you're playing too far off the ball. He doesn't need that.
Fair.
So I think that's part of the problem as well, schematically.
Though Nick Saban has, of course, over the years brought in Pete Jenkins many times to fix his defensive line. He's been a confidant of Nick's for a long time. But I get what you're saying. I mean, this on third down specifically, it's every problem that LSU has shows up the biggest because that is the moment when you have to get off the field. And it's come up in the biggest games the most. You mentioned that LSU's 125th in third down defense. It's given up 54 third down conversions. 29 of those were in 3 games: Florida State, Ole Miss, Alabama.
The 3 losses. Yep.
Exactly. Your 3 losses, or you could not get off the field on third down. And it's a combination of things going on. It's oftentimes there's been missed tackles. LSU had 12 in this Alabama game, according to Pro Football Focus. That was the most since the Ole Miss loss. LSU's tackling had admittedly improved over the last few weeks, but it hadn't played someone like a Jalen Milroe. And then LSU didn't do schematically anything to try to counteract that. That was not something that Jalen Milroe had put on tape at all this season. He had not used his legs, even though we know that they're there. And then once it started happening, LSU never adjusted to it.
He ran, I think, 16 times against Ole Miss. Or 11 times. I can't remember the number now.
He did, but the previous 5 games, 50 net yards rushing.
Oh,
for Jalen.
yeah.
Of course,
No,
that's
he had not
included,
done.
but it was,
yes, he had not done that recently at all. Which again, played into the notion that we all sort of thought that they were going to beat LSU up top if they were going to beat them. So
exactly. Okay, so maybe you think that's what's going to happen. And Ryan Kelly said how they had a plan for his strengths. But there was no adjustment to that. At halftime, Kelly said he put in the players converted 3 things up on the board: leverage, tackling, and eye discipline. And basically, okay, we're going to keep doing the same thing we're doing, and if we do these 3 things well, then we'll win. That was Kelly's message. But there was never like an adjustment to what was going on. Obviously, LSU was tied at the half. It was in a pretty good position, but you had to anticipate, and make some corrections to what was going on. And maybe that's where some of the limitations of this defense show up. Maybe you can't do some of the schematic things that you would want to do because your players aren't well equipped to do it, but there was still just nothing done to get off the field on third down in particular. And so, it's like I said, all those things showing up at once. It's the missed tackling. Soft coverage wasn't a problem as much in this game, but has been on third down earlier this season, and then unable to get to the quarterback. That was huge in this game in particular, but it's been a problem in all of LSU's 3 losses. And as a finer point on that, LSU's third down struggles have all come the most against mobile quarterbacks. It has really struggled against mobile quarterbacks.
You mentioned sort of the pressure on the quarterback, assignments, all these missed tackles, all of it. But isn't it surprising that the front 4 and or the front 7 has been, sort of an issue here? But we discussed this. I don't mean to call out players in particular, but by the same token, look at the you've mentioned this many times now, Wilson. Brian Kelly predicted a big year out of Savion Jones. Savion Jones had 3 tackles on Saturday. Mason Smith, we understand that he was dealing with an injury coming back, but this is, we're deep into the season now. The young man had 1 tackle. The front 4 just did not post. I mean, I hate to be that cruel and that crude about it, but I mean, the front 4 did not give you what you thought you were going to get out of them to start this season and throughout.
Yeah, that's to me been the biggest disappointment about this defense. As much as there's been attention on the secondary, and rightfully so, like I said earlier, like that was supposed to be the strength, was your front 7. If you were going to have success defensively, it was because Mason Smith was, helping open up things for Harold Perkins and vice versa, and Harold Perkins was getting pressured. And Harold is still like an incredible player. Like you watch him flash, and it's like, holy cow, there's things that he does that nobody else does. But it's still like not quite getting the most out of him. And that's probably a whole separate discussion. It's just that they haven't maximize what they have on the defensive line. Some guys haven't met their own potential. Maybe part of it is, losing Jimmy Lindsey right before the season and this constant churn of defensive line coaches. It certainly has not helped anything, but they haven't been able to rely on that front the way that they, I think, thought that they would be able to, and that's been an issue because they haven't gotten pressure, and that strains the back end, which we already knew coming into the season was going to be a problem, especially once they lost Greg Brooks.
As we've said before on these podcasts, there have been some tough headwinds for this LSU defense to deal with. Jimmy Lindsey falling ill before the season, Greg Brooks falling ill during the season, the most recent injuries to Zy Alexander and Mekhi Wingo, and the inexperience in the secondary, all those things. But it doesn't mean you have to be abjectly bad. It doesn't mean you have to be one of the worst defenses in the SEC. You came into the season with two potential All-Americans on this defense. With Perkins and Wingo. Now Wingo's gone, but he had played all year.
And Smith,
maybe a little bit. Mason Smith is supposed to be, this high NFL draft pick, and you bring in these transfers, and look, you have to put a lot on. You have to put a lot on coaching. They made a bad decision to move Harold Perkins inside to start the season, and it took a while to recover from that, and they were wedded to this thing, and he played badly against Florida State. I don't know if they win if he's playing on the edge against Florida State or not, but it didn't help. And some of the talent evaluation and the decisions what to do with him has been definitely questionable. Questionable in hindsight, perhaps. We weren't all screaming, "This is a terrible decision that's going to ruin them," by moving Harold Perkins inside. But it's just been a combination of things that. And the coaching and the preparation has just not helped.
I like that you use the word talent evaluation, because that to me is one of the issues specifically related to this season, and something that when you mention long term, what's going to have to improve is that LSU did not just strike on everybody that it got out of the transfer portal this year. It was really successful last year. That just hasn't been the case this season. And when you look at what this roster, what you're going to have to do to make sure that this roster is competitive, regardless of who long-term your defensive coordinator is and who's coaching on the defensive staff, you got to get those players in. And that does ultimately fall on the coaches and the defensive staff because of recruiting. And they've got to be able to properly identify the guys that they need in order to be able to have the players so that you don't have that kind of inexperience problem or, lack of talent in the back end and all those sorts of things. Going forward, that's something else that in the offseason they're going to really have to look at and evaluate. Okay, why did we maybe miss? Did we miss an talent evaluation? If so, why? And be able to correct those things, because they're going to have to go back into the portal at a few spots. And when they do, they need to be able to hit on those guys to be successful next season. I'll
just say, I guess, to be fair, to be as complete as we can, in the transfer portal, Zy Alexander, I would say, I don't want to put words in you guys' mouth, but I would think that, he did everything that they've asked him to do to this point. Yeah. J.K. Johnson, that's bad luck. The guy breaks his leg. I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. Jordan Jefferson did not have a great game on the defensive line on Saturday, but I think he's more or less done what they've asked him to do in terms of being a solid contributor on the defensive line. There was one other that I wanted to point out, and I don't see it in my notes. I did want to note that there were some decent performances on defense, though. Greg Penn, 10 tackles. As you mentioned, Harold Perkins did flash on Saturday, 8 tackles, 1 sack. Major Burns, 8 tackles. Andre Sam, 8 tackles. And I thought Javian Toviano, I think, was probably partially responsible on the 1 touchdown around the left end that Milroe score where he crashed and he probably should have kept outside contained. But past that, 7 tackles.
And that's a true freshman making his first career start.
Yeah, and first career start on the road at Alabama in the biggest game of the year. And I thought he more or less, all things being equal, sort of acquitted himself very nicely. So, and Logan Diggs, by the way, was that was a tremendous pickup in the transfer portal. So it wasn't an offer. They didn't miss all the way through. But, just as you say, frankly, there were some misses that weren't there in terms of getting hits in the transfer portal the same way they had in the first year. Jarek Bernard-Converse, Mekhi Wingo, and a whole host of Jayden Daniels and a host of other players.
Has more been on the defensive side
than
on the offensive side.
Yes, 100%. So we will get into some other things too. I'm hesitant to bring this up, but I think I'm going to guess that the LSU fan base is discussing this right now, so I think I will. Wilson, you and I talked about this before the show, and it's sort of a big picture question, and I want to do a little thought experiment. I'm going to guess that most people in the LSU fan base, and maybe you two gentlemen yourselves, looking at the program, with a pretty close eye, would consider this season to be a disappointment. I want to do a little thought experiment here, and Wilson, you got a little preview of this. If let's go back to the previous year. If LSU had played Alabama, the same set of circumstances unfold, Mason Taylor drops the pass, or if on the 2-point conversion to beat Alabama, and or Jayden Daniels sails the pass and they lose, what that would have been, I guess, 31-30. And so now, and everything else would have played out the same. LSU doesn't go, except for LSU doesn't go to Atlanta. They don't play Georgia in the SEC championship game. They would have finished 9-4. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, because you would maybe go 8-4 in the regular season as a result of that, and then maybe you win your bowl game still. Then
right.
You're 9-4.
Okay, so they're 9-4, and let's just play pretend and say that they finished 9-4 again this year, or maybe 10-3. The question is, would we still view this as this second year under Brian Kelly as a disappointment had the previous year not unfolded as it did? LSU wins the West and gets to 10 wins, maybe a little ahead of schedule. I'm not saying it should or shouldn't, but I was curious to know what you guys think about this.
It's hard to answer because, okay, if we consider everything else to be the same, then I think in some ways it would still be a disappointment, because if you still had this offense operating the way that it is and 3 losses like you do now, then it would still be a disappointment, because you would be able to look at that unit and say that is championship caliber. Is it going to win a national championship, SEC championship, whatever? It is capable of playing in those sorts of games and winning them. That offense is, especially with the way that Jayden Daniels has played this year, the improvements and leaps that he has made. So I think that this season would still be a disappointment because of, even though, big picture, it wouldn't be as much so, because you would say, oh, well, they were 5-5, and then 5-5, then 6-6, and then, or 6-7, and then you beat your Vegas odds total last year, and then you've maybe, like you said, finished 10-3, and you show incremental improvement. And so, big picture, you would be able to kind of take a step back and say, okay, no, they've actually gotten better over where they were, and they're looking like they're still on schedule. And maybe year 3 or year 4, they take that next step and leap, and you make this steady progression. But because they obviously that isn't the case, and because they have such a fantastic offense, I think this season would still be a little bit of a disappointment because you weren't able to get the most out of it.
Rab?
It definitely is, because they're still number 1 in the country in total offense.
Yeah.
I mean, they scored 28 points Saturday, which not as great as they've done, but not terrible. And although you can't totally take the offense off the hook for Saturday's game either, Jayden has that bad interception to start the fourth quarter, and they had some drop passes again. But generally speaking, it's almost like. It's almost like a Greek tragedy, LSU football, in a way. That for years, you were like, oh, well, for a lot of LSU fans, it's that serious. For years, like, when are we going to have, this is LSU fans, when are we going to have an offense? It's just this archaic Les Miles style, running up the middle 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And and they weren't. They were not keeping up with the modern offensive principles. Then you have, Joe Brady comes in with Joe Burrow, and they have this magical season in 2019. And Brian Kelly is an offensive coach, and he and Mike Denbrock obviously have a good mesh in terms of what they want, for offensive principles, and they've got a well-balanced offense, and they're running up points, and they're running up total yards, and Jayden Daniels has this season, and it's like if it's not as good as 2019, it hasn't been far off. They still had 478 yards total offense Saturday. That's with Jayden going out of the game early in the fourth quarter, but it had 7 straight games of 500 yards or more total offense, which is something the 2019 team didn't do. And then what LSU hangs its hat on traditionally, as I said, it's defense, it's defensive identity, DBU, and all these great defensive players. And now they can't stop anything. It's just like. It's almost unbelievable that you could have this kind of flip in the way the program looks, and still winning at a decent clip, not at a championship level clip, but at a decent clip. It could be championship level.
So all this is true, but I just I'll go back to, and I'm not saying it. I'm just doing this as a thought exercise. If somebody were to come to you in December 2021, right after Brian Kelly was hired, and said they're going to go I guess what we would in this theory we would say 9-4 their first year and either 9-4, 10-3 in their second year. In a vacuum, for Jayden Daniels, offense is unbelievable. Okay, we all know that now. But in a vacuum, would you have, if you were an LSU fan, a diehard LSU fan who's been dying to see some stability in the program, frankly, would you have said, well, okay, this seems like it's reasonable? 9-4 and 10 and another 9-4, 10-4, a 10-3 season. Would that have seemed like a disappointment those first 2 years?
No, but this year does seem like more of a disappointment because of what you did last year and because of the offense is so great, and so prolific.
Yep.
So no, I mean they're combined. Let's take the last year's record of what it was: 10-4, 6 wins this year, 16-7 overall. That's just above. That's about 70%.
Yeah.
It's good, but it's not great. And when you're losing to Alabama, it's in your face. You're reminded of what great is. And they're not a national championship winning team this year, in my opinion. But they're still 6-0 in the SEC, and they've beaten their two closest rivals. The race that was joined is now.
And to your point, we brought this up before. To your point about Nick Saban and Alabama, mark of a great coach. We saw what they looked like in early September where they could barely move the ball and, Jalen Milroe's getting benched. Well, now they look pretty good, don't they? Mark of a good coach.
Yes.
Getting better as the season goes on. And I don't know that anybody really wants to tangle with those guys as we go down the road.
But the program was in a bad way at the end of the Ed Orgeron era. Obviously, as Wilson said, it combined 10-12. 11-12, the last two seasons. And... they had a talent deficiency that they're still trying to overcome, it takes some time. It took Kirby Smart some time to get Georgia to where it is, and it was Nick Saban's fourth season at LSU when they won the national championship. And it was Ed Orgeron, including 2016. It was his fourth season before they won the national championship, and Les Miles was a 5, 6, 7, third season. So it takes some time. I'm not saying LSU is going to win the national title next year or not. With the transfer portal, who knows what next year's team will look like?
Schedule's
it's a tough
schedule. But it does take a little time. But Kelly, you want to try to win every game, but he kind of set himself up for a little a little people getting ahead of their skis on their expectations of this team.
Well, and to be fair, he has sort of set the bar high himself. He
didn't shy away from it.
It was after the Ole Miss loss. He said, "Look, I came here. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I don't have time. I came here to win." I mean, he said something to that effect. So anyway, look, this is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists of The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. We're here every Monday and Thursday. We are here live every Monday and Thursday on our YouTube channels, specifically LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. Please subscribe if you would. That helps us find more LSU fans, helps more LSU fans find us. If you don't see us live, you don't catch us live, you can catch us on those same YouTube channels after the fact. We are brought to you by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more about them, please go to championwealthstrategies.com. We appreciate them being aboard. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. Please subscribe to The Advocate. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. And stay up with all the latest news straight to your phone, to your desktop, to your inbox. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. That's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. You can get our newsletter delivered straight to your inbox. So, gentlemen, we have yet to really discuss Jayden Daniels and the unfortunate hit that he took. For 3 quarters, let's not forget, actually, for 3 quarters, this really was very much a back-and-forth affair. It's easy for me to say this now. It sort of felt like, and I said this to you before, Wilson, it felt to me, even though they were going back and forth and LSU had a 28-21 lead early in the second half, it felt to me like Alabama and LSU were running the same race, but Alabama was running on flat ground and LSU was running uphill. And I think a lot of that, again, has to do with third downs and defense and not getting a stop and everything like that. Nonetheless, Jayden Daniels was playing very, very well, as he often has done this year and last year as well. He He takes a shot on the chin. We will get into that and whether into the legality of that hit. But he takes a shot on the chin. He enters concussion protocol, goes out of the game, and we're taping this on Monday morning, or we're live here on Monday. So we don't yet know. Brian Kelly's press conference will be a little bit later today. We don't yet know whether he will be able to play in this game or not against Florida. It's at 6:30 p.m. Saturday in Tiger Stadium on the SEC Network. What do you expect? What can we expect if Jayden Daniels doesn't play out of Garrett Nussmeier, and just sort of we're trying to play doctor here because we just don't know. But what do we expect out of Jayden Daniels the last 3 games if he is able to go starting in this game? Wilson?
Well, if he's able to go, probably more of the same. I mean, he's been fantastic. This was the best defense that LSU had played to this point, and he was still putting up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half. I mean, there was a few plays that LSU missed offensively, but Jayden was getting them out of trouble so much with his legs because Alabama kept bailing, maybe in man coverage, and leaving the middle of the field open, and he was making defenders miss, breaking ankles. I mean, he was fantastic. I mean, so as long as he's healthy, then LSU's offense you would expect to be able to keep rolling. Jayden's tough, man. I mean, people, I don't think maybe give enough credit. They probably have more this year, especially because of what he did in the Missouri game. But this is a guy who we often see post-game with scrapes all over himself, cuts, bruises, all sorts of things. We've seen him take shot after shot, and he's like a rubber band.
He's getting pinballed.
Somehow he just keeps going. And this is a little bit of a different circumstance because this is going to be very much up to the doctors in terms of, whenever you're dealing with a concussion protocol, and him passing every test that he has to. So TBD on all that. But if he's able to play, then, I would expect the same from LSU's offense that it has been. If it's Garrett Nussmeier out there or in any more of a significant role, having a full week of practice, if that was the case, again, this is all very hypothetical and, again, not like just sort of just, in that regard, but a full week of practice, if they knew already that Jayden wasn't going to play or something like that, would help, probably. And they have a lot of faith in Garrett. We've seen Garrett play pretty darn well at times. And that would, I would not expect the LSU's offense to even look quite the same because of his skill set being different from Jayden's, and probably not be scoring at the same kind of rate. But he is a capable quarterback, someone that they still have quite a lot of trust in.
Rab, to be clear, we don't yet know whether Garrett Nussmeier will be starting, what Jayden Daniels' status is in.
If Jayden has been diagnosed with a concussion, and all we know was he went into concussion protocol, and they thought it was good enough reason they suspected, that can be like a 6-day evaluation period. If this was 20 years ago, if this was Matt Mock taking that hit against Alabama, he's probably playing the next week. But it's not, and that's good. But it's certainly, as Wilson said, changes the complexion of this game, the complexion of the LSU offense. ESPN's matchup predictor gave LSU an 87.5% chance of winning the Florida game. I assume that number goes down. That number that's plugging in Jayden Daniels to the equation. If it's not him, Florida's got a much better chance of springing an upset, quite frankly. Nussmeier he's coming cold every time, or coming off the bench late in the game and just do a lot of handing off and stuff. But he has not thrown the ball very consistently, and it's a whole other podcast we can talk about. Does LSU need to hit the transfer portal again, the quarterback position, going into next year? With Jayden Daniels leaving,
I don't think so. I
definitely think they need to.
Okay, well let's give you reasons. Rab, go ahead.
You brought it up. You got to
He's not as consistent a thrower, and he takes too many chances when he does throw. Now, he can develop a lot between now and next September 1st when they play USC, but he doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in me that he throws an accurate ball, and that I've seen in the time he's been at LSU and the sample size we've had.
Wilson, he's been very much treated as the heir apparent, and they seem to have every bit of confidence in him.
Yeah, I mean, that's all what we've heard is it'll be Garrett next season, that he came back this year. Ryan, knowing that he was going to have to sit, but, that 2024 was going to kind of be his time. And maybe it's something that you can do if spring is a disaster or something like that, and you get a veteran guy just as some insurance. But not only does it not seem like they are thinking that way, I don't think they need to think that way, because I think Garrett has shown them quite a lot. And in another full offseason of development, we saw what happens when you have that this year with Jayden. Last year to this season, like the amount of progress that he made, and now he's got a ton of experience to build on, more than Garrett has at this point. But Garrett's got a lot of arm talent, and if LSU can continue to hone that with Joe Sloan and everybody around him, then he can be a very capable quarterback.
As the Evil Twin used to say when they took questions live from the audience of the Coach's Show, Coach, I have a question. How is this significantly different from the situation they found when they came in with Miles Brennan, who had experience but had was not like the guy, but it looked like he was going to be the guy, and they brought in Jayden Daniels, to compete with him, and eventually Miles retires, from football. Now he had some extenuating circumstances with injuries, I realize, but he looked like he's paid his dues, he's waited his turn, and he's going to be the guy.
Well, this staff had no experience with Miles Brennan. They've got 2 years of experience now with Garrett Nussmeier to have seen him in practice, seen him in a few games, and be able to make much more of a comprehensive evaluation than with Miles. Miles, that was, it was good that they were able to get him back, especially if they hadn't gotten Jayden, then maybe he's the starter, maybe it's Garrett, much earlier in his career. But, Kelly came right in, got Miles to come back. And this is more of someone who they've seen now for 2 years, not sort of a rushed kind of thing like that was right at the beginning of the tenure, and everything is kind of wild, and getting in a quarterback who could be your starter. This guy, Garrett, they've seen now for a much longer time.
We're going to see. Maybe we're going to see Saturday night. This is a game LSU should win, and he should go out there and perform to a level that lets them win.
Jayden might be playing.
Right, that's right. Well, let's just play pretend whether he plays Saturday or not. Rab, what can he do to win you over between now and September 1st next year?
Make better decisions, throw a more accurate ball, and just be. He's not going to run around like Jayden Daniels, obviously, so I don't expect that. But just be a little more judicious and show that he's a better decision maker than he has been. A player can develop. Look, I will say that a player can develop a lot between now and September 1st in college. No question, no question. But I don't think. I think the defense is going to have to improve. It's going to be more of a. I expect next season to be more of a. The defense is going to have to be better, and the offense is not going to be quite this prolific. They're going to be a little closer in terms of productivity, and so. But yeah, he can be the guy, but he's got to improve in those areas.
You bring up a fine point about the offense is probably not going to be as good. Is that? Would you concede the notion that it's at least plausible that maybe you're grading Garrett Nussmeier too harshly because you're comparing him against the guy who's probably going to finish up as the second best quarterback in LSU football history?
Well, yeah, it's a tough curve, but if you want to be a championship program, it's a tough climb. If you want to be Alabama or Georgia or some of the other programs around the country, Texas coming in here looking like they're getting things going. Who's going to be the quarterback in Texas next year, Perryn?
Don't ask me.
I'm
not coaching Texas.
Well, most likely.
Malik Murphy's going to have something to say about that.
Okay, well, maybe so, but everybody expects it's going to be Arch Manning. So,
yes.
So you're going to have to step it up. You have to step it up and fill that void. Let me say this. And I'm doing a lot of Wayback Machine stuff here today. So forgive me. In 2006, when Matt Flynn was the backup to Jamarcus Russell, and Jamarcus decided to go to the NFL instead of coming back for what would have been a Heisman shot and obviously a national championship shot in 2007, I personally felt, and it's just a feeling, that Matt Flynn was better prepared to fill that role than I feel like Garrett Nussmeier is at this point, if I may say so, in my opinion.
Well, the guy did win a national championship, so I guess that's fair. We would be remiss. I hesitate to bring this up, but I don't think we can avoid it. We would be remiss if we did not bring up the hit that Dallas Turner put on Jayden Daniels to knock him out of the game ultimately, and brought forth a lot of controversy. We'll put it to you like that. He was flagged for roughing the passer. They evidently did not. I'm still not. Maybe you guys know this a little bit more clearly, but I'm not. Did they go to Birmingham? Did Birmingham just immediately say, no, we don't see anything there?
Kelly only said they reviewed it, right? I mean,
Kelly said that they talked to the officials, and the officials told him the replay booth was reviewing the play for targeting, but nothing ever came of that.
Okay. Well, where do you guys stand? Should this have been flagged for targeting? Rab?
I think it was certainly could have been. It was borderline, and you know, so it was a. Can you make the argument it was a good hard hit within the bounds of football? You can, but we've all seen quarterbacks hit like with less force and less aggressively, and the flag be thrown. We've seen flags thrown on lesser hits than that, especially when quarterbacks are involved. And if I may, this goes back to, if you're an LSU fan, you're sitting there remembering the Patrick Peterson interception that wasn't called in 2009 when he was in bounds, and the Vidal Alexander pulling the guy's leg off the pile, and he gets called for unsportsmanlike conduct that leads to the loss.
Oh, the conspiracy theorists are out in force.
You know, and look, this is a personal opinion. I remember seeing this for years with Tennessee's women's basketball team. With Pat Summitt, covered a lot of the games, watching them in the NCAA tournament, the Final Four against LSU. You know, here in Baton Rouge, the program that's perceived to be better gets the benefit of the doubt with officiating, whatever the sport. And there's probably a lot of people who can say that for balls and strikes called against with the LSU baseball team over the years. You know, so that happens, but. Yeah, that could have been flagged targeting for sure.
But the way it's getting called these days, it feels like it should have been in this moment too, or at least actually like reviewed.
Yeah, halted the game.
Halted the game and reviewed the full play for targeting. And then if you come to a decision where he wasn't, then it can be a little bit more understandable. But that's what was so strange, was that like there was, I think you got called for roughing the passer, but honestly, targeting feels more likely than roughing the passer in that moment, because Jayden got hit pretty much as soon as he threw. So it wasn't like Dallas Turner could really in that moment like change his momentum in order to not hit Jayden in some way. Like he was coming full speed at him, and that's where like I feel like okay, maybe probably shouldn't have been roughing the passer, but it probably could have been targeting, because that's a defenseless player and it's in the head or neck area, right? So. Then why wasn't it called in this modern, the way that it is often called these days? You know, that it feels like it should have been it called in that situation, and at the very least reviewed in order to be able to make a more clear decision. That was also not that you're doing it for the public, but I feel like it would have been a little bit more acceptable, at least to a degree, if it hadn't been called, if it had at least been fully reviewed for everybody to see and then get a call on it in the moment.
Don't you think in the NFL these things are a little more transparent? These referees' decisions?
I suppose so. I don't know. I would just say, this is me speaking personally, I don't think that there was malicious intent on the part of Dallas Turner. The guy's going a million miles an hour. You know, this is a football player, if ever there was one. And listen, my heart goes out to some of these defensive guys who just happen, again, because of the speed these players are going, you happen to hit somebody in a place where you didn't necessarily intend to hit them. I'm thinking,
That's very difficult.
I'm thinking back to the, you guys mentioned that people have been flagged and hit with targeting calls, that seem to be way less impactful than this one.
Devin White.
Well, do you remember? Okay, that's what everybody else went to immediately. But do you remember? This has sort of been lost in the midst of time throughout this season. But when LSU went and played Mississippi State, I forget the young man's name, and I meant to look it up before the show. But the safety for Mississippi State who got called for targeting against Jayden Daniels, he dropped his head, led with the crown, hit Jayden Daniels in the sternum, because that's it doesn't have to be head and neck. Certainly seems to help the case for targeting when it's head and neck.
But the argument was that he didn't probably expect Jayden to run standing up into him.
Correct.
The way he did.
But I mean, again, that's the point. Like, I don't think the player from Mississippi State had malicious intent. I don't think Dallas Turner had malicious intent.
Totally.
It
just happens, and the way in which it happened was, certainly suspect and should have been reviewed. And to a further point about penalties in this game, like Harold Perkins, before the 42, we were talking about third downs earlier. Alabama had a 42-yard completion, a little dump off from Jalen Miller to, I believe it was Jace McClellan on third down, and Harold just spun past the right tackle and very clearly got held, and it wasn't called, and allowed Jalen Miller to backpedal just a little bit and then dump off 42-yard completion. Now Alabama ends up missing a field goal, but like that was a moment when a penalty should have been called. And then LSU had moments though when it was penalized, and rightfully so. Like and it kind of shot itself in the foot a few times on these things with the snap infractions on Charles Turner. That was not helpful in any way, shape, or form. And also when we talk about like this offense, scored 28 points. Maybe it's a little bit more of Jayden plays the whole game, but they also had these moments where they were just a little bit faulty as an entire group, and that was hurtful in this game when you needed to be operating at an extremely high level to not be fighting uphill, like you said. There was the holding call on Will Campbell that brought back a run. This was ended up being actually kind of overshadowed, but a pivotal drive there in the second half in retrospect, when then Jayden Daniels throws a pass to Mason Taylor. It's dropped. You're facing a very long third down, and then you end up having to punt for the first time. And there was stuff like that, and like the 4th and 1, where Jayden, is rolling out, and I have no problem with the play call in that moment, but the execution wasn't good.
Sure.
The ball's a little bit behind Brian Thomas, and gets easily sort of batted away, and little stuff like that. LSU wasn't able to operate completely on full cylinders at times, and then it was trying to have to play catch up in the second half instead of sort of dictating the flow of the game. And like you said, then it really felt like, in terms of watching it, they're kind of moving uphill and trying to catch up.
I wrote Saturday night this: if it's possible for a loss to Alabama to be even more soul crushing for LSU, it was, because Jayden Daniels is performing until that interception, let's say, that he threw. And remember that when he gets hurt, LSU's down 2 scores. I don't think if he stays in the game, I don't think they're going to win.
Right. Which is why I want to say that, like, you blame the refs all you want to. That's not why LSU lost this game.
Exactly. But he was playing, the first 3 quarters at a very Heisman Trophy winning level. I told Wilson that drive at the end of the first half.
Yes.
When you go down there in a minute, he has those 2 long runs and then throws a great pass to Kyron Lacy, who makes a great effort as well to get in the end zone. That was breathtaking.
Yes.
That was Heisman-esque. And
coming out in the second
half, it could be all wiped out now. Now, Wilson and I talked about this. Maybe he's still a Heisman candidate. I don't think he wins now because they've lost again. But should he be a finalist? We think so. But are 900 and something voters around the country going to think so enough that he's one of the 4 finalists who gets sent to New York? We don't know at this point. It's very much in question now compared to what it was during that game.
It's hard to get the pulse, like you said, of 900 plus people spread across the country. But it was interesting listening to some national folks who cover college football yesterday on podcasts and reading things, that there is still an opinion out there, aside from just Baton Rouge and Louisiana area, that Jayden should be at least in New York and maybe even win the thing. Like, there was people saying still after this game, like, oh, I would still vote for him. Now there's that's at like this point in the season. There's still 3 weeks of games plus championship weekend to play. But that was just interesting to hear that, like, okay, he's not being completely written off yet by some folks' odds that you brought up. Have him outside the top 8, which in terms of winning the award makes sense, but in terms of being a finalist would be ridiculous at this point for him to be outside the top
excessive.
8. So he's still in the conversation, certainly to be a finalist. And there's still people out there who think that he should even win. I might even still be of that mind that he should win it, because he's played at a phenomenal level, and he did everything that he needed to do up until he got hurt, for the most part anyway, to keep LSU in this game and even give it a chance to be competitive in the second half.
He's done everything you could ever hope for and more. And by the numbers, he should be absolutely in the mix. I don't know. I mean, we've seen it before. You brought up Robert Griffin and Tebow and some of the other players who have won it. But while this game is going on, Michael Penix is putting on a show out there in Los Angeles.
Against the USC defense.
Against the understood. But I mean, he outdueled the reigning Heisman winner, if you want to go that route. And plus, Bo Nix, I mean, this is hard for some LSU fans, I'm sure, to believe, and given what they saw and what they didn't necessarily see when Bo Nix was at Auburn. But Bo Nix is going to have a chance to win this thing too, I think, because they're probably going to face Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. So I don't know. The other thing to remember too, and yes, it's comforting to know that people are looking at the straight numbers, but by the same token, I don't know that it's going to be easy to overcome. You had 2 sort of very, very, very big, the 2 biggest spotlight games of your season were by yourself on national television on a Sunday night against Florida State to open up the season. Didn't play as to the highest level, or to a level high enough that you would have hoped for. And then obviously against LSU, I mean, it's not necessarily the guy's fault that he gets knocked out of the game, but nonetheless, you lose the game. And frankly, whether it's on the ground or through the air, frankly, Milroe put up just, he flashed every bit as much as Jayden Daniels and then some. 4 touchdowns.
Had more yards, though.
He did have more yards, but people are going to remember that Milroe made plays, finished the game, and his team won, whether it's fair or not.
I think it was the most touchdowns rushing ever for an Alabama quarterback.
Which I find just amazing because Alabama ran the wishbone and the option for 11 million years. So you would just think that somewhere along the line they were playing Memphis or somebody that they would have, would have stumbled into 4 rushing touchdowns. There was one thing I wanted to go back to. You mentioned the snap infractions and LSU, a couple of penalties that got them behind the chains. To me, that was sort of the double whammy that really sort of left them. It just sort of felt to me that paired with all the third down stops that they didn't get and all those types of things. That's why it felt to me like LSU was running uphill, while Alabama was running on a flat course, so to speak. The other thing I wanted to say about flags that were called and weren't called and everything. To me, it was clear as day on one of those plays in the first half that Harold Perkins was running off the field, and LSU could have very easily been flagged for 12 men on the field because he had not made it to the sideline yet, and they didn't call that. The other thing, too, is I thought if you want to go tinfoil hat, not getting calls at Alabama and everything, the magnificent catch that Malik Neighbors had on the sideline there in the third quarter, that to me was one of those, in yesteryear, they would have gotten cleaned up on replay, but they would have originally, if you wanted to go conspiracy theory, that would have been one of those ones where they say, oh, no, he was out of bounds, and then they'd have to go, wrestle it out on replay. But
Malik was fantastic in this game yet again. I mean, he gets overshadowed in a loss.
It does, and it's a shame.
First catch that he has, first drive of the game, he goes over 1,000 yards receiving for the season.
Yep.
What he is doing this year is fantastic and should not be overshadowed as much. I mean, it's going to be overshadowed, and it should be overshadowed, I guess, because of the whole team thing. But it should not be forgotten, is what I should say. That what he has done this season, to be the second LSU receiver ever to have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. He put up over 100 again. He was phenomenal in the biggest game. He needed to step up, and he absolutely did.
Yep.
Hopefully he'll be a first-team All-American.
He should be a Biletnikoff finalist.
Nobody has earned it more than he has.
And somebody else.
Yeah. For sure. But at the same time, the offense doesn't totally get off the hook here for this loss. Wilson mentioned the 3 penalties on Charles Turner at center and some drop passes. And and the special
that interception, incidentally, was not Jayden Daniels' fault. I mean, Dallas Turner makes a great play, and it gets deflected up into the air.
And
what's going to happen?
It was the punting wasn't stellar again, and Ramos missed a field goal as well. So as Brian Kelly said, they on balance, you take it all together, they played good, but you got to play at an elite level. And LSU played at far from an elite level, and that's still a level collectively as a program, which is what we're saying that they have to get to, and they're not there yet.
Yeah, that's what it did. Is what it continued to show the gap between where they are now and where they want to go.
Yeah, and this is another one of those games to me. Really sort of brings into focus, okay, Alabama's got talent and depth. LSU has talent, not as much depth, which they're obviously going to have to address in recruiting. Incidentally, I did want to bring up, the deficiencies in the secondary. At the moment, they've got 4 commitments from cornerbacks, 2 from safeties, and 2 from athletes, who could, who knows what's going to happen to them. Might be wide receivers, it might be running backs, might be corners, safeties, whatever. But this is clearly a need that they know that they need to address, and are doing so, and certainly will probably do so in the transfer portal. We'll wrap it up here. We'll be back obviously on Thursday to preview LSU and Florida. The Gators themselves coming off I would say a more disappointing loss in many respects to Arkansas than LSU's loss was. Billy Napier certainly going through growing pains in his second year in Gainesville. But we will be back on Thursday to discuss that and many more. And probably, Rab, we should get into LSU women's basketball as well, since Angel and her crew by then will have played against.
Fine story by our Reed Darcey.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, a quick plug if you haven't, pick up a copy of this, because this cover, you can see a little bit here if you're watching on YouTube, that our page designer Tanya Ramirez did, is fantastic. And she deserves so much credit constantly for making our work look good.
Another newlywed like Wilson.
That's exactly right. If you've ever seen a beautiful front cover of the Advocate print section, it is almost always the handiwork of the incomparable Tanya Ramirez, our night sports editor, and she deserves every bit of credit that should come her way. Again, we will wrap it up here, though, and discuss all those things as we go down the road all the way through baseball season. Again, subscribe to The Advocate if you have not already with our print edition, with our digital edition. To do that, you go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. That's theadvocate.com/subscribe. Get a hold of our LSU newsletter. To do that, you can sign up at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. Again, it's theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are brought to you all the time, every episode, by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more about Champion Wealth Strategies, please go to championwealthstrategies.com. We appreciate them coming aboard. Catch up with us on our social channels, on our YouTube channels, specifically LSU Tigers on NOLA.com on YouTube. Subscribe if you would, please. Again, we are here every Monday and Thursday. We'll be live on those social channels, and then you can catch up. If you don't catch us live, you can catch up later on those YouTube channels. And if you haven't already, please find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever other finer podcasts are found. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Not always pleasurable topics, but it has been a pleasure. We appreciate this. We appreciate you guys. We'll be back again on Thursday. For Wilson Alexander and for Scott Rabalais, I'm Perryn Keys. And also for Amelia Cotton, back behind the glass, I'm Perryn Keys. We appreciate it. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.